Thanks for having me. I'm glad we have a nice little intimate group, because that way I can ask you questions, and instead of just nodding, you can actually answer me, and it'll be totally fine. So please feel free to share what you're thinking or ask questions in the moment, and I'll invite you to do so. So to give you a little bit of background on me and how I came to this topic. So currently I work as the assistant principal for teaching and learning at a school called St. John's Prep in Danvers. We serve all boys, grades 6 through 12. We have about 1,500 boys on campus in grades 6 through 12. I also am the mom of a 7th grader and a 4th grader, and they're both girls. So I work with boys all day, and I have girls at home. So I kind of have my feet, I definitely have my feet in both worlds, and have a in-person understanding of some of the commonalities and some of the differences. And my role at St. John's is really more like at a public school, like an assistant superintendent role. So it's, teacher professional learning, technology integration. I heard somebody mention new teacher induction, so that's my program too. And a lot of parent trainings and parent orientations and all of that. So what I'm sharing with you is part of what we do for our parents at St. John's as well. It's part of our school culture. So I know it works because I've seen it work with our families. Additionally, I work as the director of education for an internet safety nonprofit that's based out in Silicon Valley in Palo Alto, California, called Connect Safely. And we're pretty well known throughout the country for the free resources that we provide for parents and teachers around, how to just feel more comfortable with the technology that your kids are using. We partner often with the companies to help produce the resources, so that we're hearing from them what it is that they were thinking when they designed the platform to do what it does, and we can share with them what concerns we're hearing from educators and parents so that they can respond to them, and our guides are kind of a culmination of that work. So those are kind of all of my different roles, and that's why I do this, because you can see there's crossover in all of those different areas. And as we go, I'll share some of the research, some of the very latest research in the areas of digital wellness with you, and then I can drop in some tidbits about what I do as an educator, but also what I do as a parent with my own kids. Because I certainly talk to other parents who have kids my same age, and I see what they're doing, so I can see all the different styles and preferences, and every child is different too. And I know that from my own experience. My 2 kids they're both girls, but they're very different in their understandings and abilities to navigate, their time, their relationships, all of those things. So what you choose to do with one child may not work, probably won't work for another. And it may not work for what works for one child may not work for the others in that same friend group, right? Even if you have relationships with those parents. So we'll talk about all of that. First, let's talk about what digital wellness is. So digital wellness is, as it says, a cohesive conversation about our cultural norms around all areas of wellness when we use technology. So it's kind of a new term. I don't want to claim that I coined it, but I did start using it, I would say 3 years ago, kind of right when the pandemic was hitting, and it worked perfectly for our school community because of how our patterns with technology shifted. And so we already had that lexicon in our school community, and we're able to adapt it very well, some of those concepts. So we'll talk about that too. And it continues to work quite well for us. One of the questions I get is, why are we talking about digital wellness when we still need to really get a handle on like screen time, right? And screen use and how much time they're spending on screens. So to get a sense of where you all are, I'm going to invite you to take your phones out. Okay, and you are going to scan this QR code, and we're gonna do a little activity together. Okay. Yeah, you can look on. Just open up your camera, and you'll focus in on the QR code, and then a little link will pop up on your screen. You'll be able to tap it, and it should open your browser to the correct page. Absolutely, absolutely, do it together. So you're ranking your feelings as a parent about your adolescent's use of screens from most to least common, and then I have our live results here as we go. So feel free to, and you're just dragging and dropping them from, it won't let you open it? We'll try. So the other thing you can do is go to this URL if you want. That's on the bottom right here. That's another way. No, it should only allow you to submit once, I think.
If it hasn't done 3, I'm not like putting.
Yeah. This is so good for you guys. I love that we're doing this together. I love that we're doing this together. Yeah. Yeah, so you're dragging and dropping, so you're putting them in order. It's like a ranking activity. This is so great because, so that you all know, this is exactly what happens to a teacher the first time they try a new tool in the classroom, right? There's kids who get it right away, and then there's students who are like, it's not working for me, and then there's students who are saying, I keep hitting the button, am I doing it right? All of this is very normal, and it's okay. So if it isn't working the way you expect, please do let us know. Yeah, so this is crowdsourced, this is live results. Yeah. Yeah. So this is good. Often when I do this presentation to like a really big group, like I've done this to like hundreds of people at once, it's a really great way for me to get a feel for the crowd when I can't have individual conversations like I can with you all, to get a sense for where people are. And when I go to communities where like anxious is at the top, I'm like, okay, now I know where we are as a room, right? And where I go to where opposed, I've been in communities where opposed is at the top, and that's a good way for me to read the audience. So this is just a good way for you all to see too how it's really essential for us to be able to do these kinds of activities in the classroom with students before we start a learning activity, so that we can get a sense for where they are before we get started. So that's good, it helps me. When you think of your children's use of screens in our pandemic, so not pre-pandemic, but pandemic and now, like post-pandemic world, what are the words that come to mind? You can enter up to 3 words. And it should have automatically switched on your screen to this question. You can enter up to 3 words. And you can't enter phrases, so it's 3 separate words. And you can see they're live, our answers are live loading up on the screen. Good words, everybody. So I'm seeing some words that are pretty objective, right? Like I think the word adept is pretty objective, like you're just observing that they're pretty adept with using the technology. Omnipresent is pretty objective, like it just seems like they always have it. Whereas other words I'm seeing are tied to emotion that are up here. I think anxious, tiring, stressful, those are scary, those are all tied to emotion. So it's just worth looking at, you know, where your answers fall into the crowd, and note that some of us are here maybe with a more emotional mindset, and some of us are just here like curious, having made some observations. And some of us are probably a mix of the 2 things, and that's okay too. All right, so your instincts are correct. So Common Sense Media is a group that does some pretty awesome longitudinal research about teens and adolescents' use of technology, and has for years. Probably they have for the longest of any research group. And they're great about publishing it. So this research study that was done late last year was just released earlier this month. And the use of screen media is up 17% in teens and tweens since the start of the pandemic. That's what I'm seeing. That's what all of us are seeing. This isn't shocking for any of us. What I wanted to talk about when it comes to screen use, though, is that I think if we're focusing just on the amount of time they're spending on screens, we're getting focused on one detail that isn't actually that important when it comes to their well-being. There's a couple of reasons. Screen time experts will talk about active screen time and passive screen time, and for the educators in the room, this is like old news, right? So passive screen time is when you're just consuming. It's the doom scrolling that you do on Instagram at night in the dark. That's passive. A Netflix binge is passive. When your kids watch like YouTube video after YouTube video that auto loads for them, that's passive. Whereas active screen time is when they're creating or collaborating. So when I left my house, my 10-year-old was on like a FaceTime call with two of her friends. That's active because she's talking to her friends about whatever they're talking about. I have a daughter who really likes to write. So anytime she's like writing her stories or writing about anything, that's considered active screen time because it's engaging cognitively a part of her brain. So I think our gut is that, okay, active screen time then is good, passive is bad. So no matter how much time they're spending, the more active, the better, right? Well, there's exceptions to everything. So a great example of active screen time is the TikTok challenges that happened last fall. So this is active screen time because they're seeing something online that's inspiring them to try to do something in person. And there's great examples of this that are positive. Like I have a daughter who's like really into getting better and honing her lacrosse skills. So she will watch the replays of the BC women's lacrosse games for hours and then go out on our bounce back net and like spend forever out there trying to imitate what they're doing. This is the same thing. Watching what other kids are doing online and then going out in the real world and imitating it. This is active screen time. So it isn't active good, passive bad. It's all a matter of what you do. This is why the screen time conversation falls short and it's not enough if that's all we're talking about. If all we're talking about is, haha, I cut your time off at 7 p.m., you're not actually helping their well-being unless the conversation goes deeper than that. Screen use also falls short because it doesn't really talk about relationships. Like if their screen time just cuts off at 7 p.m., but they're on a call with their best friend who just broke up with a partner and they're crying, is that really helpful to their well-being or their friend's well-being? Because 7 o'clock is the cutoff time. So the nurturing of those adolescent relationships is really essential to identity and the development of their authentic selves at this time. And it was important during connections, to maintain connections during lockdown, of course. The other thing is it doesn't talk about like this, like co-viewing. So I still every now and then will watch like a Disney movie with my little one, and she's not little, but curled up on the couch, even though she's 10. And I think of that as really good quality time with her. Is that screen time? Yup, right? So I think, again, if we're just talking about screen time, we're not thinking about the whole picture. And when we look at the results from Common Sense, that 17% uptick, that includes all use of screen media. So streaming music is often on a screen. Podcasts are usually streamed through a screen. And we're doing a lot more e-reading. And so that all counts in their screen time. So the 17% uptick is not just watching mindless YouTube videos, it's all of this. And I actually do a lot toward encouraging the podcasts and the music and the print. And that would be, in many cases, still passive screen time. But if I look at their screen time on my phone and it says like 5 or 6 hours, but then I look at how they spent it and what they were doing, I'm not as alarmed because it was more of this and less of the YouTube, for instance. The other thing is one of the perks of my job as an administrator is bus duty. Really fun, especially when it's like raining sideways at 7:15 in the morning. But when I'm out there watching parents drop off, well, as the buses are coming through, many of the parents have their kids in the car, and the kids look like this. So the same parents who are coming to me at some of our programming and saying that they're uncomfortable with how much time their children are spending on screens in school with our teachers while supervised are dropping their kids off like this and not making the choice to use that in the car one-on-one time for that nurturing of that parent-child relationship, but allowing this to happen. So I think we need to kind of think about all of the adults who are really caring for this child and all of the messages that they're getting, not just through what we say, but what we do. And that time in the car is like trapped, precious time that we could use to our advantage. Or if you've had it and they've had it, then that's okay too. But I think it's also important for parents to understand, sort of from the teacher perspective, if they're on a learning platform and it looks like they're not doing anything, the teacher has very carefully curated that time on this platform, and they're supervised and they're looking at that happen. So I think it helps for all of us to kind of understand all the different ways that we're looking at the use of their screens. So the other question I get about digital wellness is, why do we need digital wellness when digital citizenship is finally something that is in like the modern American lexicon? Like, parents know what digital citizenship is, schools know what it is, why are we gonna add another term? So I have another one for you. So if you close the window, you can scan it again. If not, you are going to see the question pop up. And my question for you is, what do good digital citizens, there's an X-ray in there, sorry for that typo. What do good digital citizens of all ages do? And this is, you enter the words. What do good digital citizens do? What are actions that they take? Act respectfully with words and actions. Good. I'm seeing the word kind, the word respect, responsibility comes up quite a bit. That's great. So if you asked your students or your children this question, would they use these same words? Respect, responsibility, kindness. Yeah. Do they always do this even though they know the answer? No, right? So I think one of the reasons I'm a fan of moving to digital wellness is because they know what adults want them to say when we say digital citizenship. And they know how to tell you the answer that you want while still knowingly making the choices that we don't want for them. So one of the reasons is that digital wellness it's a word that it's a phrase that hasn't kind of lost its meaning for children. And it will eventually, like everything does, right, over time, and we have to evolve with our kids, but that's just one thing to kind of consider. And then my question for you, and this is for as an educator or a parent or both, how often are you talking positively and encouragingly about digital citizenship with your children at home? So not just calling them out on the things that went wrong, but how often are you congratulating them on doing things right? Or how often are you asking them about how it's going so that they have an opportunity to share with you that they've done something right? So how often are you talking about it in a positive way? This is good, pretty even. So some more than others, and that's okay. I think it's a new skill to learn, and what I liken this to is when it comes to parenting is nutrition, right? So I'm not a dietitian, I'm not a nutritionist. Do I talk to my children every single day about what they're choosing to put in their bodies in terms of food and what that means for their health? 100% yes, right? You all are probably not someone, you probably don't spend the amount of time I spend with technology or reviewing the research around all of this, but should you be talking to your children about how they're spending their time with technology and what they're putting into their brains and what that will mean for their well-being? Yes. You don't have to be an expert to have a say or to have those conversations that will help them learn the skills. You know, will they roll their eyes? And yeah, of course. Do they when I talk about the food thing with them? Yeah, of course. But that's what we know from surveys of adolescents, the surveys that are done in schools every year annually through the federal government, is that over and over adolescents say the people who have the greatest influence on their decisions are their parents. And even though they would never tell their parents that in many cases, some will, and maybe they won't even say something until later, you know, that it is important that you bring this up every day because it does have a great influence on them. Okay, so let's dig into why digital citizenship falls short. So I think digital citizenship falls short because part of being an effective user of technology is not just being like your authentic true self and being kind and responsible, but also knowing how to navigate the platforms, and that's digital literacy. So we need our kids to know basic troubleshooting: turn it on, turn it back off, kill the app, open it up again, sign out, sign back in, unplug, replug it in. We need them to know all of that stuff so that they can just navigate their day. We also need them to do that so that they can fix stuff for us. Like my TV wouldn't work, and I put my 13-year-old on it because I was like, I don't have time, I have 7 other things to do, you need to troubleshoot the TV right now. Could I have done it? Yes, but like that's, you know, division of labor in the household sometimes includes troubleshooting, so we need them to have those skills. We also need them to have those skills so they can make it through a school day, okay? So that's important. Building creative solutions. Gone are the days where school projects were either writing a paper or taking a test. Just those days are gone. They need to be able to come up with creative ways to show what they've learned. And in some cases, that project will be prescribed by a teacher, and in other cases, the teacher will say, I need you to come up with some kind of product. It can be one of these 7 things, but if you have another idea, feel free to bring it to me. The kids who bring something novel to their teacher, there's something special happening in that brain in terms of thinking and learning. And if your child has the digital literacy skills to feel confident to do something like that, you're giving them an advantage to kind of move a few steps ahead. And so that's why I think digital citizenship falls short, because it doesn't really talk about those skills. And this is just one of my favorite graphics, because this is what every kid's Google Drive looks like, and maybe some teachers, right? And this is what it could look like, right? Color-coded, organized. And everything, you know where to find every single thing. And we all, I mean, this is Google Drive, but it could be whatever filing system that you all use professionally. And you know how important this is for you. It's important that they learn these skills now. So the other thing is media literacy, and we're going to talk a lot more about media literacy later, but we know that the way some of the algorithms work, both on news media sites and social media sites, is that we get pulled towards stories and information that the algorithms think we want to see, rather than the news and information that's going to give us a more even perspective on what's happening. And we need our children to be able to recognize when that's happening and actively seek out other perspectives on information. The strategy that they use to do that is called lateral reading, and I'm going to talk more about that, but schools are teaching that, and it's really helpful for you to know what it is as a parent so that you can complement that or supplement that teaching at home and model it with your children as well. They'll be better informed voters later on, and they'll be better at their jobs. They'll be better humans if they know how to do this lateral reading thing that we'll talk about later. We also know that last summer, with the Black Lives Matter movement and just the real kind of influx in social awareness that happened, over 70% of adolescents said that they felt like they were involved or able to engage in those topics online in a way that none of us ever could when there were social movements going on when we were younger. So they're already actively engaging. So it's important for us to be talking to them about the skills of that active engagement now and not saying like, oh, we'll save that for when they're older, because they're already doing it based on what the research is showing for us. And the last thing is focus and concentration. We just know that when it comes to technology use, we tend to try to multitask. And we'll talk about how multitasking isn't really a thing. And digital citizenship just doesn't talk about stepping away from the technology. Digital citizenship talks about how to be a good person when you're online, but it doesn't talk about preserving your well-being by choosing to step away and what stepping away looks like and what the research shows stepping away has to be in order for it to really recharge your batteries. So we'll talk about that too. Okay, so the 4 areas of digital wellness are physical wellness, cognitive wellness, emotional wellness, and community wellness. And we're gonna go through them one at a time, and I'm gonna share a little bit of research from each area. There's so much more than what I'm going to show you tonight, and I will give you practical tips on how to apply this at the end. So if there's a research study that I cite or something and if you want to read it for yourself, you can just message me and I'll show you how to do that later. If it particularly applies to you. But each of these 4 areas of wellness, I think it's a more thorough way to think about technology use. So first we're going to talk about physical wellness. When I think of physical wellness, the 3 areas that are easiest to talk to audiences about are sleep, eye health, and exercise, and how our use of technology affects these 3 things. There we go. So when it comes to sleep, there was a study 2 years ago, and they found that of the children, the adolescents who were like 11 to 15 who kept a phone in their rooms, their sleep struggle, it was like 77% of them struggled with sleep. They were not getting enough sleep as compared to the adolescents who didn't keep the phone in their rooms. So here's my real world solution to this, because I know how hard it is to get them to not take it to their rooms and how sneaky they are, because I have some at home. My 13-year-old does actually sleep with it in her room now, but she didn't when she first got her phone. And that's because I have it so it's basically rendered to be like a pane of glass after a certain time when I know I need her to be sleeping. So I have the settings on her phone so that at a certain time, at 9 basically, so she can be up in her room by herself with her phone and her friends, therefore, for a time, because she's a teenager and I get that she needs that time, but she knows it turns off at 9. If she's gonna need a little more time, she also knows she can request it from me, and the expectation is that I'm just gonna ask why she needs the extra time. So now what happens, because we've practiced this before she was allowed to have it in her room, now what happens is she sees that we're getting close to time, she'll shoot me a quick text message and say, can I have 15 more minutes? I'm on a call with my friend and we're talking about something important. And I'll be like, sure, 15 minutes, no problem. Or can I have 15 more minutes? I just am not tired. And I'm like, nope, that's not a good enough reason. It's going off at 9. I mean, she can ask, I can say no, I can say yes. It's not a fight, it's just part of our routine, it's part of the expectation. My 10-year-old does not have her phone in her room. We have not solidified that cycle enough yet. There is a charging station in the kitchen, and that is where her phone stays, along with other family devices that don't go in bedrooms. Like my husband and I we have devices that go in our bedrooms, and we have devices that don't. And my kids are aware of where everybody's devices are. It's something we talk about all the time. So, but the sleep thing is important because there's data to back up that practice. And we know how much sleep they need as adolescents. It's like a lot more than adults. So when it comes to eye strain, so there's an actual diagnosable, any ophthalmologists in the room? No? Okay, so it's called computer vision syndrome, and it's diagnosable. The American Academy of Ophthalmologists published this infographic during the pandemic because so many people were working from home. So it's that twitch that you get, you know the twitch that you get? Yeah, so it's the twitch, it's redness, it's itchiness, dryness, all of those things. You're not blinking enough is what's happening. And oftentimes we're setting up the computer so we're not looking at it properly. So it's important when you're looking at a screen that your eyelids are not too open. So one thing that happens sometimes in elementary schools, they'll set up the computer labs and it'll be set up by adults. And the adults will set up the computer lab so that it's perfect for them. But then the kid sits in the seat and they're looking like this at all the computers. That's like breeding ground for computer vision syndrome. Computer labs for little kids have to be set up so they're looking at it down, right? So to protect their eyes. The 20-20-20 rule, have you heard of that? So do you know what it is? Every 20 minutes, what do? You look somewhere else for how long? For 20 seconds. Where else do you need to look for this to work? Like not just like at the ceiling and some lights. Not like at a clock on the wall. Like you need to look out a window. You need to look outside. So it needs to be not, industrial construction. It needs to be something in the natural world for it to work. So that's important. So if after 20 minutes in a computer lab, teachers, they want to go for a walk, let them go for a walk down the hall. They actually need it. And that's important. And then they say you can use artificial tears if it's real extreme, but we hope we don't let our kids get there, right? The other thing is lighting. They shouldn't be using their screens in a dark room. They should have the lights on above. And you should have the other thing that happens with the boys at St. John's anyway is they use iPads in class. They'll have the dimness all the way down to save the battery on their iPads, but that's really bad for their eyes. It's important to have the dimness up as much as possible along with good lighting in the room. So one of the things I'll do is I'll say, no, if you're running low on battery, keep the dimness up. You can move your seats so that you can charge. It's more important that you have your dimness up so that you can see and you're not straining your eyes. And the last one is for physical wellness is actual exercise. I know that, like I said, my daughter watches women's lacrosse and then we'll go outside and imitate that. So as much as possible, that's what we want to encourage when it comes to screen use and physicality. A lot of the boys at St. John's are very into working out and our strength and conditioning trainers will send them videos to show proper form for certain workouts. And then that way they can imitate those and try them at home. So the more you can think about what is it that they value when their bodies are active and try to get them to see that there's media online that can encourage them to enhance their skills in those areas, look at more variety in those areas. And they can actually use their screen time to encourage them to do those things. So that's another outlet, another potential. I know it works a lot. My children's coaches send them videos of things all the time for all their different sports, and it works. So it's definitely motivating. All right, the next area. Any questions about physical wellness, digital wellness? The next is cognitive wellness. So this is thinking, creating, organizing, everything that has to do with your brain. So 3 areas here: focus and concentration, problem solving and creating, and then are you learning responsibly or are you using your technology to escape your cognitive responsibilities? Are you using it as an economic suck instead of an economic building block? So this is such a great study. It was done at Stanford with a bunch of undergraduates. They did 50, 50, and 50, 3 groups. And they had them take an IQ style test, and they put them in 3 different rooms. So in room 1, they could have their phone on their desk, just face down, just like this, while they took the test. Phone had to be off. In room 2, they could have their phone in their pocket, had to be off, or on their person, not on their desk. Or it could be in their bag on the floor kind of thing, and had to be off. Room number 3, they could not bring their phone in the room with them. So that's you today, right? Unplugged. Could not bring their phone in the room to them. So then they asked them after they took the test. This wasn't a hard test, just IQ, fun little puzzles, that kind of thing. How did you feel about how you did on the test? These are Stanford undergraduates, so they're I did great, I did fine, right? I go to Stanford, I did fine. All of them. Without really any variation, the learners who did it with no phone in the room with them at all did the best. The learners who had their phone either in their pocket or in the bag did the next best, and the learners who had their phones on the desk did sort of the worst. Now, Did any of them fail it? No, they didn't fail it. The phone was off, right? But just the presence of your phone can actually have an impact on your ability to focus and concentrate. Even if they knew it was off, they knew they weren't going to get their notifications, but it still had an impact on their brain's ability to focus on the test. So really fascinating study, and I really like to share that with students because they're like, nope, that's not true, that's not true. One of these days I'm going to run this at St. John's just for fun, just to see what happens. So this video is a good one to share with your kids about multitasking because it's short, and there's a neuroscientist who talks about it, so he does a really nice job.
Turns out that multitasking is a myth. We think that we're doing a whole bunch of things at once, but we're not actually, because the brain doesn't work that way. And a number of studies now have shown, from Earl Miller's lab at MIT and others, that what we're really doing is we're paying attention to one thing for a little bit of time, and then another, and then another, and then we come back around to the first. And all of these are separate projects that are occurring in separate parts of the brain. They require a separate start time, a separate monitoring process, and you end up fractionating your attention into little bits and pieces, not really engaging fully in any one thing. All that switching across tasks comes with a neurobiological cost. It depletes resources. So after an hour or two of attempting to multitask, if we find that we're tired and we can't focus, it's because those very neurochemicals we needed to focus are now gone. There are some jobs that require not multitasking because we know it doesn't exist, but this kind of rapid switching. I'm air traffic controller, simultaneous translator at the UN, journalists, monitoring all these different things at once. And we can take a tip from the air traffic controllers who, as part of their duty cycle, are required after every hour and a half or 2 hours of work, it's mandated that they take a 15 to 30-minute break. And that means an unplugged, disconnected break where they go for a walk, or they listen to music, they exercise, something to restore all of the burned up neurochemicals. You might ask, during this period of our evolution, when there's all this information, is the brain adapting and changing? And yes, it is. The brain adapts and changes all the time. Evolution is happening all the time. Unfortunately, it's rather sluggish. We talk about it in terms of evolutionary lag, and generally speaking, it takes about 20,000 years for the brain to catch up with the way the environment is, and in terms of how it's encoded in the genome. So 20,000 years from now, our brains may have evolved to deal with it. In the meantime, we have to employ strategies, just a little bit more self-discipline than we currently use, to filter out unwanted or unnecessary input. I'm not talking about never letting something frivolous or fun in, but I'm talking about adopting a kind of a habit of allowing yourself to focus on one thing at a time for at least a few hours a day.
So the way I do this is I will, on like my work calendar, I will block off the times when I'm going to dive into my email, and I won't dive into my email outside of that time. So I do it in the morning, and then I do it like right after lunch, and then I'll do it before I leave the office for the day. And sometimes that time gets overtaken by something else, but I will never check email outside of that time, because email is the thing that gets me multitasking. And I know that essentially when you're multitasking, you're losing about 40% of your efficiency. So if you want to, I mean, he didn't give that hard number, but if you really want to actually maximize how much you're getting done on any given day, you need to block out the time and stay as faithful to that time that you've blocked out as possible. If you choose to multitask, you essentially, all the studies over and over show you lose 40%. So you're doing everything 40% slower, or you're doing it at a 40% reduced quality. Either one. You can't have both. When it comes to switching gears, though, in terms of cognitive wellness, the other part of it was the creating, right? So the technology is allowing our brains an outlet for creation. And when it comes to digital media outside of school, 8 to 18-year-olds are reporting that during the pandemic, they were able to learn how to do something new, create something, and then share those creations with others, thanks to digital media in a way that they wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. And I'm sure you can all think of something that your kids did during the pandemic with digital media that they were, because they had to do something, right? And so for my children, it was a lot of TikTok dances they did together. It was like video tours. They would like build something and then make a video tour of what they built and then send that video to a friend. And sometimes it was like Lego, sometimes it was just a piece of art that they drew. Then they would take a video of themselves explaining what they drew and why they drew it and then send that to a friend, and that's how they shared like their artwork with each other. So that all counts toward this, and that's a really great example of like positive engagement of their cognition through screens and devices. Some other really positive screen use activities that increased during 2021, and all of these are based on that common sense study: writing, creating digital art, creating music, video chatting, e-reading, listening to podcasts, and emailing. So kids, there's an increase in kids doing all of this. So remember, I said 17% uptick in screen time, but some of that was really great stuff. So it's important to look at that number and look at all the nuances of that number. All right, our next area is emotional wellness. Any questions about cognitive wellness? Okay, so emotional wellness, the areas I like to think of here are identity and authenticity. How do they feel about who they are? How are they identifying who they are? And are they being their real selves when they're using screen media? How does their use of media impact their feelings about themselves and their sense of purpose in the world? And then FOMO and healthy sharing. So we're going to talk about the research behind all of that. So the American Academy of Pediatrics released this study, and this is actually not that new. This is like 2016 or something. And I found this, to me, this felt more real than what I was hearing people around me saying at that time. At that time, people were saying the online world is not the real world. We need kids to engage in the real world. I was hearing that a lot from parents and teachers that I work with. But this is showing that youth use of social media is actually part of the development of some critical adolescent things like identity and aspirational development. So they're actually exploring inspirational creators and thinkers and skateboarders, and that's part of how they're learning about who they could become or what are the things that they could do. And that is part of how they figure out their place in their in-person worlds, by looking at how others are sharing themselves in this online world. So it isn't like separate, like they're not really being their true selves because they're online. They're actually helping themselves figure out who they are by looking at others online. That's not the only way that they do those adolescent development tasks, but it's a part of it. And it's just as important as the in-person stuff for them. So to tell them that it's not real is actually making them feel like a part of themselves isn't real, because that's how they feel about it. That's important for us to understand. Even if we don't emotionally feel the same way about it, that's how they feel about it. And it's important for us to try to understand their perspective. This came out, of course, perfectly. I don't know, it's like Netflix knew the pandemic was going to happen when they put this together in the summer of 2020. Do you remember? Do you guys remember? If you worked in schools, you remember, because parents were calling you every 5 seconds about it. The Social Dilemma. So it's this docudrama, right? It's not really a documentary. It's a docudrama because they share some documentary data, but then they couple it with this dramatization of this family where the whole thing goes off the rails with this family. They have the girl who breaks the box, right, with her smartphone in it, and the boy who goes to this extremist political rally. So both of the children go. That's two different things, but. And one of the pieces of data from this that a lot of the parents that I've worked with have held on to is that higher social media use is correlated with self-reported declines in mental and physical health for adolescents. So why are we letting our adolescents use social media at all? If social media use correlates with mental and physical health, they should just not be on social media. And then I'll have parents come to me, even still today at St. John's, really proud, well, he's not allowed on social media. And like they're coming in as freshmen. He's not allowed on social media and we don't think we're going to allow it. So we just want to make sure that St. John's supports that. And I'm like, well, I mean, That's a parenting decision, but the research doesn't back it, and I can share a little information with you if you'd like to know a little more. Because this is correlation, this is not causation, and study after study after study is showing us that it's the anxiety and depression that actually causes the increased use of social media and not the other way around. That children who are more likely to have anxiety and depressive symptoms are more likely to have an increased time spent on social media, and it isn't the time spent on social media that causes the anxiety and depression, okay? It doesn't mean that they're diagnosed with anxiety or diagnosed with depression, but if they have the symptoms, they're more likely to spend more of the time. So that's important to note. If you're seeing an increase of use of social media with your child, it may be an indicator that you may want to explore some of that with them, and start talking to their PCP and start exploring whether they, need to talk to somebody in a way that would help them with those symptoms. That's not to say that there isn't such a thing as FOMO, fear of missing out. So we do all, and I think adults do too, have that twinge that happens when you see a group of people who you think of as your friends out without you doing something, or I don't know. And the same thing happens to our children. So FOMO is real, but FOMO isn't the same as anxiety and depression, right? FOMO is just it's like that twinge you feel in the moment, like, oh, why didn't they call me? Or why wasn't I there? Or how come I didn't know about that? And it doesn't go away. So it is important for us to talk to children about that, because they'll experience it as adults too, right? We all do. The really common answer in terms of minimizing FOMO, the fear of missing out, is to just take a break from social media. But all of the studies show that that doesn't work, because as soon as you hop on, you missed out on whatever happened on social media while you weren't there. So you're causing another layer of FOMO for yourself. Instead, there are these 4 things that you can do. So the first one, this little heart is a little cheesy. They say here, focus on what you have rather than what you lack. What they really mean there is curate your social media feed. So make sure you're seeing posts from people who the posts that you see make you smile and make you happy and you're excited for them, or they're posts from people who are influencers who you follow because they inspire you. If there are people who the more you see from their stuff, the more FOMO you feel because they're kind of braggy, you don't have to mute them, but maybe set the settings so that you see them less often in your feed. So you're still able to keep up with them, but you're not sort of seeing it every time you log on. And once you learn how to do that for yourself, you can teach that to your children so that they can, and then you can adjust the settings and bring somebody back to your feed. You don't have to unfriend someone or block them to just mute them from your feed. And that way they're still available for you to see. So that's one way, that's one self-care for FOMO. Seek out real connections. Use your connections on social media to actively arrange to meet up with people as much as possible so that you're having your own events in person and you're not feeling so much FOMO because you're like, well, I wasn't there, but I got to do this other thing on that day with this other person. Or, I had an appointment that day, so I couldn't go, but I was able to see them last week. And so great that they got to see each other again, So I think that's important. You have to actually take some action for yourself. So keep a journal. This is so easy. I do this every night. I have this little journal app. I literally get in bed. It's dark. The last thing I do on my phone before is I set my alarm and I type 3 sentences in my little journal app and then I put it down. And it's nothing. Sometimes it's I cooked an awesome dinner tonight. Everybody ate it. Sometimes that's my journal for the night. Other times it's I don't know why I'm exhausted. I didn't have a bad day, but I'm done with today. And sometimes that's what I write. But then it's whatever it is that I had in my head, it's done, it's gone. And I can go to sleep and I don't have so much FOMO or anxiety about any lingering things during the day. So the journaling thing is, I would tell you, I know there's people who say get up in the morning and set your intentions and meditate and journal. Who has time to do that in the morning? Nobody. But this is something I do every night and it's made a huge difference. And then focus on gratitude. This is a little corny, but on the nights when we're able to have family dinners, we do a, what are you grateful for today? And it's they'll roll their eyes, but it's important, and it makes a difference, and it's great modeling. And it's a habit that they can even develop and start doing on their own. And all of that helps with FOMO. The research shows it. So the last area is community wellness. And this has to do with how your use of technology has an impact on your relationships with friends, family, the community that you're a part of, your basically your social, also like your place and your purpose within social justice. Like, are you an activist? Are you somebody who feels as though you can make a difference in the world? All of that is part of community. So this is fostering family and friend relationships, your communication with others, both for our children it's academics, for us it's professional, and then our civic awareness and engagement. So the study that came out that has to do with mental health right during the lockdown part of the pandemic, so this came out like a little over a year ago, shows that digital media was a huge social safety net for our children because they were watching us fall off the rails. They were watching us fall apart. So they were falling apart too, but they were watching adults fall apart. And they really needed digital media and their devices to stay connected to their friends because for them, that was a really important social safety net when sometimes their adults were not a safety net. And I think we can all admit, that there were moments where I had it under control and I was keeping my people safe, and there were moments where like I didn't have it. And it's important for them to have other safety nets besides us. And that was important during the pandemic. This is the very recent one that came out that says that the way that they like to stay connected, playing video games together online is huge. It's bigger than it's ever been. And that's another reason why it's important for screen time to not just shut off at 7 p.m. because if they're in the middle of a video game and it shuts off, not only have you cut off a really important conversation, but they may have like let their friends down in the game. So it's kind of like these video games have the same importance to them in terms of like their obligations to their friends and how they're staying connected. So if they ask for a few more minutes, it's okay to say like, yeah, 10 minutes, sure, but not like a half an hour, right? And the more you have those conversations, the more they'll accept your decisions. Also hanging out with video chats. The video chats are, I don't know, they're just always on are your kids like always on video chats? All the time, yeah, all the time in my house. Or even watching TV shows or movies together online. So they'll stream the same show, but it'd be on FaceTime. Do they do that? Mine do that, yeah. And then attending virtual groups like clubs or classes, that's a little less common now than it was during the pandemic. The great news about all of this is that more teens and tweens than ever want to get together with their friends in person and prefer that to the digital connection that they had to do during the pandemic. So guess what that means is our obligation to help them make it happen. They don't really know how to set up their own like get-togethers because they haven't ever had to do it. So if I think about it, my 13-year-old, when the pandemic hit, she was like 10 and a half, 11. So was she the teenager setting up her own get-togethers with her friends when she was that age yet? No. All of a sudden she can. She doesn't know how because she wasn't allowed to for 2 years. So we need to help them with this. So rather than assuming, how come you never get together with your friends? We actually need to be the ones to say, let's plan something for this weekend. Who would you want to come? What would you want to do? Here are 7 ideas or 3 ideas that I have. You could go to the movies. I could just drop you off at the park. You could, because they are going to have trouble coming up with ideas because they're out of practice. So we can help them by being proactive with that. So this last one is the civic engagement piece, and I really wanted to show you this video about what lateral reading is because schools are teaching this all over the country, and it's a newish way to think about media literacy and making sure that the information that we are consuming is accurate and helpful. The way I was taught media literacy in college was to look at the URL. Is it a .edu or a .org? To read the bio of the people who authored it and all of that. And that doesn't work anymore. So this will explain what lateral reading is and why it works.
We live in an era of information overabundance. This demands that we be more discerning. Instead of accepting information at face value, we should always ask this one important question: who's behind the information? The Stanford History Education Group conducted a study with Stanford undergraduates, professors from 4 different universities, and professional fact-checkers to determine the most effective methods for evaluating digital information. There were dramatic differences in how intelligent people looked at the web. Many smart undergrads and esteemed professors evaluated a site by reading vertically, staying on the site and reading it as if it were a printed document. They focused on the site's look, its aesthetics, graphics, and overall appearance. They were deceived by an official-looking logo or the name of the organization. They attributed importance to the .org in the URL without realizing that .org is an open domain. Any individual or group can buy a .org domain without passing a character test or proving they're working for social betterment. They examined scholarly references and research reports without realizing that, unlike an academic journal, on the web, anything goes. Intelligent people equipped with critical thinking skills were often taken in by slick web pages. Professional fact-checkers approach the web differently. They understood that on the web, what you see is often not what you get. The web is treacherous territory, and you can't let your eyes deceive you. Landing on an unfamiliar site, they didn't waste precious time engaged in close reading. Instead, they opened new tabs in their browser and read laterally. Rather than spending time on a site like the Employment Policies Institute, they turned to the broader web. They clicked on a New York Times article about the Employment Policies Institute entitled, "Fight Over Minimum Wage Illustrates Web of Industry Ties." They scanned the Wikipedia entry, which describes the Institute as a fiscally conservative think tank particularly aimed towards reducing the minimum wage. Its staff worked for a public affairs firm owned by Richard Berman. A search for Richard Berman leads to a 60 Minutes report which labels Berman as Dr. Evil for his use of nonprofit front groups that advocate on behalf of his corporate clients. Only 40% of bright Stanford students were able to make the link to Berman. 100% of the fact-checkers did, often in a fraction of the time. Lateral reading was the reason why. Our research studies have shown that lateral reading can be taught. Students in classes that completed civic online reasoning lessons significantly increased their ability to accurately judge websites compared to a control group. Lateral reading stands in sharp contrast to many methods for teaching digital literacy. These methods focus on long checklists of questions and keep students' eyes on a single site before they've even established that the site is worth their time. Although the basic idea of lateral reading is simple, becoming skilled at it takes practice. Students need to see examples of lateral reading and practice it with a range of sources. They also need to know when they've found a reliable news source or one that's known for conspiracy theories. Lateral reading helps students to find better information online and to become informed and more thoughtful members of society.
So when it comes to community wellness, their ability to understand the information that they're consuming and compare it with other information is really, really, really important as they're moving through. Both for research for academics, but also as we're approaching like another presidential cycle. Some of the children who we're teaching now will be old enough to vote when that happens, and we have another election coming up in the fall. I think whenever we're approaching that, I'm always kind of thinking about this. I'll do whole teacher workshops where we just practice this with all the teachers in the room, and they're just like blown away at. I'll pull 4 news articles about the same event from 4 different news sources, and we'll read them all together, and I'll pull something from that morning. Like I never have a plan for which articles I'm going to use. I wake up that morning and just decide based on whatever's like the hottest, most controversial thing. And if you're not doing this regularly, first practice it, then talk about it and model it with your children as like news stories come up, especially the very controversial political ones. It's really important. So I'm cognizant of time. I know we started a little late, so I'm ending a little late. The next slides are all like the practical things that you can do, but these are also all of the things that I shared with the staff here, so they're gonna share it out to you all. So when it comes to digital wellness, I'm in the middle of writing a 5-part series that's published on Connect Safely. If you go to this URL, and the link will be in the resources, that's the first article, and at the bottom of the first article are the links to the second and third article. The fourth and fifth article are coming out soon. Each article is one of the areas. So the physical wellness is out, cognitive wellness is out, and emotional is coming, and then community is coming. And then if you have children and you're an Apple family, I highly recommend using family sharing, not just because it saves you money by being able to share apps and share storage space and share music and share Apple TV Plus and all of that stuff, but also because of these 2 features, Ask to Buy. I have that on both of my children's devices. They do not have any apps on their devices that I don't know about or that I haven't approved myself. And that includes my 13-year-old. And like that Ask to Buy feature isn't going anywhere, even though she's gonna keep getting older. But like, she has Snapchat, she has TikTok because she asked for it, so we got to have a conversation about it first, right? I think that's an important thing. That's part of the whole thing. And then screen time allows you to put some time limits in, and they can request more time and all of that. So you can see, my husband is on it too, but I don't have those limits on him. Maybe, I don't know, maybe someday I will. If you're a Google family, we also use Google Family Link. So my kids both also have Chromebooks that are their personal Chromebooks, not the school's. So I don't use Family Link for my oldest anymore, but for my youngest I still do. Basically because my oldest has like earned the trust over a time. So you can see over here, like I can lock her Chromebook so she can't use it at all if I need to. I just would go in and hit the lock button. She has a daily time limit of 3 hours. When I did this at like 2:30 today, she hadn't used any of it yet. And it's 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. Like it won't work during that time when I want her to be asleep. And then these are content restrictions. So if I were to click on each of these things, I have like age restrictions set up for what website she can get to, what videos she can watch on YouTube, what apps she can download. And then these are all the apps that she's requested. And you can't really see it with this projector, but you can see some of them are denied. Some of them, the app request expired because she requested it, but never actually came to me and told me why she wanted it, and she knows that's a condition. So just because I get the request doesn't mean I'm answering it. I also need a conversation. So if she requested it and then I never got a conversation, it just expired because she never came to me. And then some I approved. And these are all silly games. And most of the time she plays them for 2 seconds and then she deletes them because she's sick of them. So this guide I highly recommend. It's the Parent's Guide to Educational Technology. It has lots of great questions, lots of information about how your kids are using technology in school, and great questions to ask teachers, administrators, and tech directors about like why they make the choices for the tools that they make and what they do, and all of that. And then there's some great conversation starter questions for you to ask your children. And you can read these later, but this is really important. If your child mentions an app or a program they want to use, and you're like, what the heck is that? YouTube is your friend. So if you haven't yet checked out don't just look up TikTok videos on YouTube. Go on YouTube and look, how do I use TikTok? Or why do people love TikTok? Or TikTok for dummies, whatever. Look it up, and it will teach you how to use TikTok. Then download it on your phone, create an account, and try it out. And if you feel comfortable enough, ask your children to show you how to use it. This is going to get you much further in your conversations with them than you are presently if you haven't done this yet. And this is true for anything, for Snapchat, for anything. And then this other tip is when your children will encounter situations that are hard, on specifically group chats are where it happens the most, whether it's a group chat in a video game or a group chat on Snapchat or a group chat in iMessage, that's where the tough stuff happens. It's really important that you talk about what they would do if, and coming up with scenarios and hypotheticals ahead of time so that when it happens, they know that, number one, you know that it happens. They don't have to be embarrassed that it happened to them because you've already thought of it. It's not like they're gonna have to, they're worried that they're gonna have to come to you saying like, I got myself into this situation and I'm embarrassed. If you have already said, someday you'll be in this situation, there's no embarrassment. So they'll know they can come to you. And if they choose not to come to you, they've at least talked to you about it. And they're like, what did my mom or dad say of when I could do with this? And then they'll be able to enact that advice. So having those proactive conversations is really key. Couple more guides that connect safely. Our guide to TikTok is great. I talked about family sharing with Apple devices. On TikTok, you can do family pairing. So I have a TikTok account because I pair my TikTok account with my 13-year-old's TikTok account. And TikTok knows that she's my daughter. So can I control her account? No. But can she ever block me? No. You know, I have a deal with her though that like I'm not going to interact with her friends. I'm not going to mess with all those interactions. But it's where our accounts are tied together, which gives me some measure of visibility on her account, which is great. And then Snapchat has great reporting tools. They also have instituted some location sharing settings. So the default is that your location is shared whenever you snap. And if you care about like apps tracking where your children are, it's important for you to know how to change that. And there's guides for everything. Right? I don't know if you have younger kids. My younger one plays Roblox constantly. And there's more than that. And another resource that I wanted to share is family contracts and pledges. So there's a children's pledge for littles, there's a teens pledge, and there's a parents pledge, which is so great because it says, like, I promise I will not overreact if there's a problem that they're having online. We'll work together to solve the problem. So it's you saying actively, like, I promise I won't overreact. And that means when something happens and you're really upset, you're gonna have to try to handle that internally. And if you need to handle it internally first before you talk to them, it's okay to say like, thank you for telling me. We're gonna have to talk about this in a little bit. And like, I love you and thank you for telling me. And then like, it's okay to walk away, right? And then come back when you can. That's important modeling. Okay, and that's all I have for you today. So I know it was a ton. So thank you so much for coming. Like I said, those last few slides will be shared with you with links to all those like practical resources. And if there's any of the research that you want to see, any of the studies that you'd like to read for yourself, feel free to shoot me a message, and I'd be happy to send you the link. But I didn't want to overload you with links. There's too many. And the @CarrieHawk02, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram, and those are all public and open. So if you follow me there, then you can just DM me. That's the best way to reach me on those platforms.